It was a cold day in January 2006. A building sat above a busy shopping centre in North London. People came and went below, completely unaware of a deceased woman above them. Unopened mail was everywhere. Finally, an unknown Good Samaritan contacted police. Police forced their way inside. What they found was something from a nightmare, a scene that would shock the entire nation. In the living room, a skeleton was sitting on the sofa. The television was still on, its pale light flickering in the dim room. This was all that remained of a woman named Joyce Vincent. She'd been dead for nearly 3 years. How could this happen? It's a question that echoes long after the initial shock fades. London is a city of millions. It is a place of constant movement, noise, and connection. Yet here was a person who had simply vanished in plain sight. Her absence created no ripple, no alarm, no search parties, although she had many friends, including in the music industry. Why did they not report her missing? The post piled up behind her door, a silent testament to the passing days, weeks, and years. The smell of decomposition had been dismissed by neighbors as coming from the nearby rubbish bins. It's a detail that is almost too difficult to comprehend, a story that forces us to look at the world around us a little differently. Joyce was around 38 years old when she died. The cause of death remains a mystery. A pathologist couldn't determine it because her body was too decomposed. It was thought she might have died from an asthma attack or complications from a peptic ulcer. But without evidence, we are left only with questions. Who was she in those final moments? Was she in pain? Did she try to call for help? These are the haunting unknowns that linger. Her story is not just about a death, but about a life that was lived and then, somehow, completely forgotten by the world outside her front door. She was full of life and even met Nelson Mandela. There is a documentary out there about this tragic case. The discovery sent a shiver through the city and beyond. Newspapers ran headlines that were hard to believe. Woman lay dead for 3 years. It sounded like a piece of fiction, a grim urban legend. But this was real. It was a stark reminder that in our sprawling, interconnected modern world, a person can still fall through the cracks so completely. The story of Joyce Vincent became a symbol of urban loneliness, a tragic commentary on a society that can sometimes fail its most vulnerable members. Her quiet end in a busy city raises profound questions about community, connection, and our own responsibilities to one another. To understand how Joyce could be forgotten, we must first understand who she was. She wasn't a recluse or someone who shunned the world. In fact, she was the opposite. Friends and former colleagues remembered her as vibrant, beautiful, and intelligent. She was someone who lit up a room. Born in London to parents from the Caribbean, she had 4 older sisters. By all accounts, she was ambitious and full of life. She once had dinner with Nelson Mandela and met other famous figures like Stevie Wonder. She seemed to be living a life many would envy, full of exciting encounters and potential. Her career path showed a woman of capability and drive. She worked in the finance departments of major companies in London. She was good at her job and well liked by those she worked with. She quit a good job in 2001 for reasons that are not entirely clear. After that, her life seemed to take a different turn. She moved from one temporary job to another. She drifted away from her family, though the reasons for this estrangement remained private and complex. It appears she was crafting a new life for herself. But perhaps it was one that left her increasingly isolated from her past. Friends described her as someone who was always on the move, always reinventing herself. If things went wrong in one area of her life, she would simply cut ties and start over somewhere new. This quality might have been a strength, a sign of her resilience, but it may also have been her downfall. By constantly moving on, she may have prevented herself from building the deep, lasting roots that could have supported her in a time of crisis. She was a chameleon, able to fit in anywhere, but perhaps belonging nowhere completely. There were hints that her life was not as perfect as it seemed on the surface. She spent some time in a shelter for victims of domestic abuse. This suggests a hidden struggle, a vulnerability that she kept from most people she knew. It's possible she was running from a dangerous situation. This could explain why she cut off contact with so many people. She might have felt that disappearing was her only way to stay safe. This adds another layer of tragedy to her story. She wasn't just forgotten. She may have been actively trying to become invisible to protect herself. The scene inside Joyce's flat was profoundly sad. It was a snapshot of a life interrupted. The television was on, tuned to the BBC. The heating was also running, a low hum in the otherwise silent room. These small details paint a picture of her last moments. She was likely just sitting on her sofa, watching TV, like millions of other people on any given night. There was no sign of a struggle, no indication of anything unusual. It was an ordinary evening that became her last. The silent flickering screen became her only companion for 3 long years. On the floor there were Christmas presents. They were wrapped and ready to be given, but the name tags were blank. Who were they for? This is one of the most heartbreaking details. It shows she was thinking of others. She was preparing for a festive season that she would never get to celebrate. The gifts sat there unopened as seasons changed outside her window. They represent connections that were never made, relationships that were left unresolved. They are a powerful symbol of a life that still had love and kindness to give, even as it was fading away. The flat itself was a bedsit, a small one-room apartment. It was located in Wood Green, a busy area of London. It was owned by a housing association and was used to house people who were vulnerable or had been through difficult times. This context is important. Joyce was in a system designed to provide a safety net, yet that net completely failed her. Her rent was being partially paid by housing benefits directly to the landlord. This is why it took so long for her absence to be noticed. The rent arrears only started to build up significantly after the benefits were stopped, triggering the repossession process. Every detail inside that room tells a part of the story. The half-full shopping bags, the mail piled high behind the door, the food in the kitchen, dated 2003. Together, they create a chilling timeline of her isolation. Her neighbors never reported anything suspicious. They assumed the smell was from bins, and the constant sound of the television was just a sign of someone living there. No one knocked. No one checked. The systems in place, both social and official, did not work. Her small apartment in the middle of a bustling city became a tomb. Why did nobody notice? There isn't a single simple answer. It was a combination of factors, a perfect storm of social disconnection and systemic failure. Joyce had intentionally distanced herself from her family and some of her friends. She was a private person who, it seems, did not want to be found by certain people from her past. This desire for privacy, perhaps born from a need for safety, created the initial void. She was a woman who was skilled at disappearing, and in the end, she disappeared so completely that no one came looking for her. The nature of modern urban life also played a significant role. In a large city like London, anonymity is the norm. We live packed together in apartment buildings, yet we often don't know our neighbors' names. We are taught to mind our own business, not to intrude. The constant noise and activity of the city can mask the silence of a single, lonely person. The sounds from Joyce's flat were not alarming. They were normal. The television's hum became part of the background noise of the building, a sign of life that was actually a sign of death. The official systems that should have caught her fall failed spectacularly. The housing association, the utility companies, the council, none of them had a procedure in place to check on the welfare of a person who had suddenly gone silent. Her bills were being paid automatically, at least for a while. It was only when the money ran out that any action was taken. Her story exposes a critical flaw in our society. We have systems for managing finances, but not for managing human well-being. A person can be reduced to a series of accounts and transactions, and as long as those are in order, the person herself can be utterly ignored. Ultimately, the tragic story of Joyce Vincent is a mirror held up to our own lives. It forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. Who in our own communities might be slipping away unnoticed? Do we know our neighbors? Do we check in on friends we haven't heard from in a while? It's easy to assume that everyone is fine, that no news is good news. But Joyce's story proves that silence can be the most alarming sound of all. Her legacy should be a challenge to us all, to look up from our busy lives, to listen more carefully to the silence, and to reach out a hand before it's too late.